Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. Today is our very first true crime video.
I'm so excited.
I can't wait because we have a good one for you this time. We're starting big, which is kind of setting the bar for us, so we can't disappoint.
It is.
We decided to do this one because of American Horror Story 1984 is on, and they had one of the most notorious serial killers on there, Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker.
Such a scary story. Okay, first of all, we're huge true crime fans. Like, you guys probably know this. We've talked about this a lot. We are obsessed with podcasts, true crime shows, anything about like this crazy phenomenon of serial killers, which makes us sound a little bit crazy, but I feel like everybody's kind of interested in this in some aspect.
It's because everybody wants to know why.
Yeah,
why can somebody do what they did?
Yeah.
What can create a serial killer, or are they born?
Yeah.
You know, it's just so interesting. But yeah, so we're going to go from start to finish because American Horror Story came out and not a lot of people even knew who he was, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
So we're going to go over start to finish, birth to death. Maybe he's not dead. I'm not spoiling the ending for you, so don't make me.
Watch until the end. This is probably going to be a long video, so grab your snacks. We have our snacks. We're also kind of doing like a mukbang, too, at the same time. Mostly because we were just hungry and we wanted to eat. So we have pizza, fries, veggie straws, popcorn.
And
we're just going to chill.
To eat food, we're going to do it.
So grab your snacks, grab your drinks, get a blanket, lock your doors, because this is a scary story. I told Kaycie right when she came over here, I was like, I've been researching this for some reason when I'm alone, when Quinn's not here, reading all the stories at night. And this happened in LA, which is where we live. So I'm like, anytime I hear something,
in both of our cities. Like, this happened in both of our, like, what?
Also, disclaimer, you guys probably know this, but this is very gruesome, the stuff that we're going to get into. If you are very squeamish, if you don't like hearing details of murders and that kind of thing, this is probably not the video for you. We're going to go into detail about some things that aren't very lighthearted. It's a serious video.
And if we make jokes about anything, it's not because we think it's funny. We might joke around to keep it lighthearted. Okay, so let's get our plates and our french fries and our pizza.
Yay!
And let's get right into it. What do you guys eat your french fries with? I want to know because they're... You nasty.
Is it on my face?
No. Did it squirt?
Are you sure?
Yeah. Oh wait, look at me. Look at me. There's like a speckle right there in your crow's feet. It almost looks like a Euphoria look.
Did you just say I have crow's feet?
No.
We also do have our notes down here on my computer because even though we know like most of the story, we might forget some dates and we don't want to be disrespectful.
We want to get it right.
Okay, so Richard Ramirez was born February 29th in 1960 in El Paso, Texas. His mom and dad were Mexican immigrants, and his mom actually worked in a boot factory, which some people think that she was exposed to some chemicals that caused birth defects in all of her children. He had, I think, 5 brothers, right?
There were 5 total siblings, 1 sister, 4 brothers. Okay. 3 brothers.
And when Richard was 2, he suffered a really bad head injury. A dresser fell on his head, giving him a huge laceration. And then a few years later, he got knocked in the head by a swing. He became unconscious, and after that, he started having epileptic seizures. So I don't know what it is about getting hit in the head, but a lot of serial killers were said to have...
That's when you ask for a refund.
Yeah. You're like, nope.
I want a new kid.
I don't want this one anymore. Have you ever been hit in the head really bad when you were a kid?
I fell off a porch once. It's a story.
So all of Richard's brothers and his dad had really bad tempers, and by the time Richard hit puberty, it got really bad. He really wanted to play sports in school, but since he had the seizures, they wouldn't let him play, so he got really upset about that, kind of turned in on himself and just kind of became more angry at the fact that he couldn't do what he wanted to do. He stated that his father he kind of took his anger out on his mom and abused her, and all of his brothers were angry as well, and they kind of all took their anger out on each other, so he started actually sleeping in cemeteries when he was around 12 or so, really young, to get away from his family life while he could.
Who wasn't triggered by that? Like, oh, there's a child sleeping in a cemetery. Any of the school counselors, this kid's freaking weird. What's going on with him? I don't know.
And then around the same time, when Richard was around 12, he started hanging out with his cousin Miguel. Some people refer to him as Mike too, but for the sake of the story, we're just going to call him Miguel. He was actually a veteran, and he began showing Richard really graphic photos of Vietnamese women that he tortured and murdered. So he would show him all these photos, really explicit, graphic, disgusting photos of terrible things that he did to these women. And Richard became intrigued by those. Miguel was actually married to a woman named Jessie, and she was upset at how much he was hanging out with Richard and just wanted him to get off his ass and get a job, pretty much. And they got in fights about that a lot. So one day she was coming home from getting groceries, and she walked through the door, and Miguel shot her in the face and killed her, and Richard was there and saw everything. What was that? Is a ghost angry?
It came from the hallway.
I'm sweating. Okay. We're going to ignore that, whatever ghost is haunting my kitchen right now. So he shot and killed her right in front of Richard and ended up going to jail, but only served 7 years, of course.
Due to reason of insanity.
So when Miguel was in jail, he asked Richard's father and Richard to go back to his house and get some of his wife's jewelry for some reason, and they went and got it. And Richard, we have this quote from him describing the visit when he went back to the house. He said, "That day I went back to the apartment. It was like some kind of mystical experience. It was all quiet and still and hot in there. You could smell the dried blood. Particles of dust just seemed to hover in the air. I looked at the place where Jessie had fallen and died, and I got this kind of tingly feeling. Then my father told me to look in her pocketbook for the jewelry my cousin wanted, and I dumped Jessie's pocketbook on the bed and looked through her things. It gave me the weirdest feeling. I mean, I knew her, and these were her things, and she was dead, murdered, gone. And I was touching her things. It made me feel in contact with her." That's so creepy.
I wonder if he went and slept in the cemetery where she was buried.
Oh, that's a good question. Probably.
Weirdo.
It's just weird that he felt connected to her once she was dead, not when she was, like, alive.
His cousin Miguel would talk to him about Satanism, and this is kind of where it all derived from. If you don't know, Richard was a really big Satanist. A lot of his crimes revolved around that. After his cousin Miguel went to prison, he moved in with his sister Ruth because, again, things with his dad were not great at home. So he moved in with Ruth and her husband Roberto, who ended up being just as bad as everybody else in the family. He was a peeping Tom, in the sense that he would go to other people's houses and spy on them. He used to take little Richie with him, and that's what they called him.
I just picture little Richie.
Anyways, he actually said that it was sexually stimulating for him, and eventually he would start breaking into his own homes and spying on people in bed just to see if he could get away with it. So he's 13 at this point, and I honestly think this is the very beginning of his curiosity of murder and rape.
It's crazy how he was surrounded by so many creeps that influenced him.
So many, all like his dad, is all his family, all the core people in your life.
Mm-hmm. His poor mom.
Okay, so at 15 years old is when he started getting into LSD, magic mushrooms, and he really started getting into Satanism at that point. He saw him as a much more, I don't know.
Accepting?
Yeah, like a better deity is the word they use. I don't know religious terms, but he was into Satan and he wasn't into Catholicism. He started working at the Holiday Inn at 15, and this was his very first real crime. You know, drugs are their own little thing, but this was a forced entry into one of the rooms using the master pass key that he had. He forced himself onto a woman. He tied her up. However, the husband came in right when he tied her up and chased him off. He ran. He was caught, arrested, but released because the couple was visiting in town and they did not want to come back and press charges. So he got away with that.
And his family believed that he was innocent because he said that it was consensual. He said that the lady invited him back into her room.
Yep.
And they believed him.
Yep.
So,
of course.
Of course.
Because, I mean, my son has 2 head injuries, sleeps in cemeteries, and loves the devil, so why not believe him?
So in 1978, when Richard was 18, he decided to fully estrange himself from his family and move to LA. He didn't have a place, really. He was kind of just a transient. He lived on the streets. He moved from city to city. And he continued to have minor run-ins with the law, so a lot of them were like petty theft, burglaries, things like that. And then he actually ended up spending some time in the LA County Jail in 1983 for auto theft, and then once again a year later in 1984 for the same thing, auto theft. And then shortly after that last release in 1984, he committed his first murder as the Night Stalker. So he was active in his murders 1984 and 1985. It was pretty short-lived, but he did a lot of damage in that year, let me tell you. And he also kind of hopped between Southern California and LA and made it his way up to San Francisco for a while, and then he ended up making his way back down to LA. When it came to details about his crimes and his murders, It was hard to tell if it was coincidence or like what the pattern was because, like I said, he was jumping around from city to city. Just
No
random
motive.
Yeah, no motive. So cities that weren't really clustered close together either, like kind of spread out in this area down here. And he did not have a preference in the people that he attacked or murdered, men and women, ranging in ages from just super young to like 80 years old. Didn't care about what kind of people he was going after. It really just seemed like he was going after whoever had their doors unlocked at night. Basically, who was an easy target.
It was difficult for the police to put two and two together because he had many different weapons. So it's not like he just used a gun on it. He had a gun, a machete, a knife. He would bludgeon people with tire irons, like all this different stuff. He's in different areas. San Francisco reached out to the LAPD and was like, hey, we think the Night Stalker hit up here. And they were like, I doubt it. But honestly, from like San Diego, Orange County area, all the way up to the Bay Area. If you don't live in California, that's about, just from here to San Francisco is a 6 to 8 hour drive. So.
Yeah, it's really far. And a lot of the victims that survived these attacks, that were lucky enough to survive, described him as having dark curly hair and rotten breath. Like that was something that was a pattern between all these people reporting on him, is that he just had disgusting teeth. Like this guy apparently never went to the dentist, didn't take care of his teeth, so that was like so.
Well, and he was a drug addict. He did all these drugs. Lord knows. I mean, the devil knows. He did not go to the dentist ever in his life.
So do you want to read the list of victims?
Oh God, okay.
This is where it gets gruesome, you guys, but
I don't want to miss anything, so I'm just going to read straight from the list. If I'm looking down, that is why.
How many total were there?
I think 13 total murders, but...
That he was convicted of.
Yeah. There is one that I'm going to leave out and save for the very, very end of the story, because that one wasn't discovered until 2009. So we're going to start with June 28th, 1984. 79-year-old Jenny Vincow was found dead in her apartment in Eagle Rock, Los Angeles, just south of Glendale's Forest Lawn Memorial. She'd been stabbed repeatedly and her throat was slashed so severely that she was almost decapitated. A few months passed. That was in June. We're in February now, 1985. Sisters Christina and Mary Caldwell, ages 58 and 71, were found dead in their home. They each were stabbed a dozen times. On March 17th, 1985, he attacked 22-year-old Angela Barrios outside of her home in Rosemead, California. He shot her before entering her house. Inside was her roommate, Dale Akasaki, age 34, whom Ramirez immediately shot and killed. Barrios survived. The bullet had ricocheted off the keys she held in her hands as she lifted them to protect herself.
Wow.
Within an hour of killing Akasaki, Ramirez struck again in Monterey Park. He attacked 30-year-old Tsai Lian Yu, I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing these, and pulled her out of her car onto the road. He shot her several times and fled. At this point, the news media was coming up with different names to call him. I know they were calling him, the Screen Door Killer, Valley Intruder, and then they all finally settled on the Night Stalker. So yeah, that was around this time. On March 27th, 1985, Ramirez shot Vincent Zazara, age 64, and his wife, age 44. Oh, her name is Maxine. Sorry, I skipped over that. Zazara's body was mutilated with several stab wounds with a T carving on her left breast, and her eyes were gouged out. The autopsy determined that the mutilations were postpartum, so at least she was already passed away.
Yeah, Jesus.
I mean, if you're going to have your eyes gouged out, please let me be dead already. May 30th, 1985, Ramirez attacked Malviel Keller, age 83, and her disabled sister, Blanche Wolfe, age 80, beating each with a hammer. Ramirez attempted to rape Keller but failed. Using lipstick, he drew pentagrams on Keller's thigh and on the wall in the bedroom. Wolfe survived the attack. The next day, Ruth Wilson, 41, was bound, raped, and sodomized by Ramirez, while her 12-year-old son was locked in the closet. Ramirez slashed Wilson once and then bound her and her son together and left. June 2nd, 1985, Edgar Wildgens, 29, was shot and killed by Ramirez. His girlfriend was raped several times by Ramirez but survived. From early June through early July, 3 more women were killed. 2 had their throats slit, 1 was beaten to death, and all 3 had their homes invaded. On July 5th, 1985, 16-year-old Whitney Bennett survived after being beaten by a tire iron. July 7th, 1985, Linda Fortuna, 63, was attacked. Ramirez tried to rape her but failed. July 20th, 1985, in Sun Valley, Ramirez shot and killed 32-year-old man Chitat Asawahem, and his wife Sakima, 29, was beaten and forced to perform oral sex. Ramirez then collected valuables and proceeded to leave. Later in the same day, a Glendale couple, Maxon Needing, 66, and his wife Layla, age 66, were shot and their corpses were mutilated. August 6, 1985. Ramirez shot both Christopher Peterson, 38, and his wife Virginia, 27, in the head. Miraculously, they both survived. On August 8th, Ramirez attacked a Diamond Bar couple, fatally shooting Ahmed Zia, 35, before raping, sodomizing, and forcing Zia's wife Sue Kaycie, 28, to perform fellatio on him. August 17th, 1985, Ramirez shot 66-year-old Peter Pan in the head. I want to make a Peter Pan joke so bad.
Don't do it.
In San Francisco, also shooting and beating his wife Barbara, who survived the attack. August 24th, 1985, Ramirez traveled 50 miles south of Los Angeles to Mission Viejo, which is Orange County area, so close to San Diego, and broke into the Mediterranean Village apartment of Bill Carnes, 29, and his fiancée Inez Erickson, 27. Ramirez shot Carnes in the head and raped Erickson. He demanded she swear her love to Satan and afterward forced her to perform oral sex. He then tied her and left. Erickson struggled to get to the window and saw the car Ramirez was driving. She was able to give a description of both Ramirez and his orange Toyota station wagon, which soon led to his capture.
Thank God she noticed that, because nobody else up until that point was able to.
When you're in a state of fear, you never know how you're going to react. You don't think to do those things. And I'm just glad that somebody, it clicked. Like,
yeah.
Okay, I need to get something.
So as the media coverage kind of blew up about this Night Stalker, there was a huge increase of gun sales, people buying like locks and stuff for their windows.
Lock your doors, hide your kids, hide your wife, hide your kids, hide your wife, hide your kid. I was just watching that last night.
I haven't seen that in so long.
You don't have to confess. We looking for you. We gon' find you. Okay, I'm done.
This was also at a time where there wasn't really AC, so people were closing their windows at night and just dying in this heat, but they were so terrified of the Night Stalker trying to break in that they just like had to lock their doors, lock their windows. Okay guys, so we're getting to a huge part of the story. James Romero is a 13-year-old boy who had been camping with his family in Mexico, and they just got back. I think it was around like midnight. His family was asleep. He decided he wanted to go out to the camper to get a pillow or something that was in there, but it was locked. So he wasn't tired. He didn't want to go to bed. So he ended up going into his garage to work on his bike. But as he was heading into his garage, he heard some rustling in his yard or in like the shrubs. But he kind of like went to investigate it, but then he was just like, it's probably a rodent, or because they had a lot of wildlife that would like come and go, and he was used to that. So he didn't think anything of it. And then he went into the garage to work on his bicycle alone, and he heard footsteps coming up to the side of the garage and stop.
He heard the gravel on the side of the house where his parents' bedroom was, and he got scared, but he couldn't run because the light was on. So he said whoever was next to him, because imagine a door or a wall right here. The Night Stalker is Kayla and I'm James, sitting there playing on my bike. So he knew whatever he did, the Night Stalker was going to see him do it. So he crouched down next to the car and kind of like sideswept to the house door. So he gets inside and he runs to his room because he wants to get a look at this guy. So a little bit ago, their garage was broken into by prowlers, and they stole some tools, I think an adapter of some kind, just a bunch of knickknacks. And they filed a police report, but he said it filed with the police, and then they didn't do anything after that. So he wanted to get a description of this guy. So he thought it was a prowler, and he was like, oh, they're going to catch him if I can get something on him. And so he ran down the hallway to his bedroom to get a good look, and his dad woke up, came out of his room, was like, what the hell are you doing up? It's midnight. He's like, it's a prowler, and he pushed past his dad and ran outside. So he runs outside and he sees Richard get into his Toyota Corolla station wagon, I think it was.
Isn't that the same car that lady described when she got attacked?
And he doesn't know at this point that there's a serial killer, so he's not aware. So he still thinks this is just a prowler. And the way Richard's car is facing, it's facing down a hill, so he should have just driven off, but instead he did a U-turn and drove past James and looked at him directly in the eye as he drove off. So He got a good description of what he looked like, and he remembered part of the license plate, so he ran inside and wrote it down so he wouldn't forget it, and then they called the police. They took the phone calls, like, took everything down, and then they called him back, and they were asking him questions, like, for specific details, which was weird. And then the next day they showed up at his house and was like, hey, can we take you somewhere to look at this car? Can you identify it? When he got back, his parents were at the neighbor's house, and they were all watching the news, and that's when they learned of the Night Stalker and how he had just killed Inez's husband. Who was it? The victim that that saw his car. That couple. He had just killed the boyfriend
right after that night, after he went to James' house.
I don't know if it was right after he saw James or right before he was at James's house. When the police finally realized what was going down, they came and they searched the area where he was, James said the Night Stalker was. They found the footprint, they plastered it, and they realized that the Night Stalker was standing right outside of his parents' bedroom. So if James hadn't come out, he probably would have broken in and killed his parents.
So shortly after this whole thing went down, the owner of a strip mall type area called the police and reported a car that he thought had been like stolen or abandoned in his parking lot. And it ended up being the car that Richard Ramirez was driving. And the police were able to... So apparently Richard cleaned like everything, or he wore gloves or something. So there were hardly any traces of him being in the car, but they did find one fingerprint on the rearview mirror.
This was like right around the time when they started getting really advanced DNA testing. They only had half of his fingerprint. They were able to use the brand new system they had, identify the ID, run it through the system. And because Ramirez had been just locked up for petty theft, I think it was, and all those little stupid crimes he did, they had his mugshot.
This is where shit goes down, and it starts to get just justice porn right here.
We didn't say this in the beginning, but the ending of this story,
it's so satisfying. So Ramirez decided to go visit his brother in Arizona at this time, and he didn't realize while he was gone that the media had gotten a hold of these fingerprints, basically proof that he was the Night Stalker. They used his mugshot from his previous arrest. They plastered that all over the news, all over every single news channel, front page of the paper. Everybody finally knew he was the Night Stalker, so it was everywhere, but he had no idea because he was in Arizona. So he comes back, takes a bus back, and at this time, all the police were staked out along the bus stations, thinking that he was going to try to escape town, knowing that he was finally caught, but he was coming back into town. He somehow evades all these police officers, walks right into a convenience store, doesn't know what's going on, but when he's in the store, a lady sees him, and she starts yelling and causing a commotion and trying to get the attention of police officers outside. So he looks over, he sees his face on the front page of the newspaper, freaks out, bolts out of the store, and he ends up trying to steal a car from a lady, and he doesn't succeed. He doesn't get the car, so he starts running down the street, and just people start chasing after him, thinking that some people were thinking that he was just a theft trying to, steal this car. Some people noticed him as the Night Stalker and just wanted to capture him. It started out with two young men, I guess, chasing after him, and then people started...
Imagine, isn't there a commercial where, people are running, or movies, people are running, and then somebody just sees and then just starts running with them?
Just joining in on the fun.
200 people of downtown Los Angeles all came together.
It's a huge mob. Everybody's chasing after him. There ended up being, 7 police cars, a helicopter in this pursuit. And finally, the mob catches up to Ramirez, and they tackle him, they start beating him. They beat him so bad that by the time the police get to them and tear everybody off Ramirez, he thanks the police for rescuing him because he would have died. Mm-hmm. These people were not going to let him go.
That would have been justice. Okay, so they capture Ramirez, they take him back. So now what they have to do is Inez and James, they have to bring him in and do a lineup and see if they recognize him. So Inez and James meet for the first time at the police station, and immediately when Inez sees James, she gives him a big hug and she thanks him, which is a really sweet moment. James recalls as they bring him into the station, I believe it's the LAPD station, but they bring him in past all the evidence and artifacts that were taken or damaged and all the stuff from Richard. He said it was an entire warehouse full of things that were stolen. And it was just really eerie, and they go into the room, and as he walks in, they identify him immediately. Both of them do. So James, being a 13-year-old boy, the only downside of this is I don't know what happened with Inez, if she got any. I don't know if Inez got anything out of this. I just know because James did. This is from an article. They did a press conference with James, and the LAPD surprised him with ATV, which is like I think it was a 3-wheeler. He ended up becoming a key witness in his trials later, a few years later. So
when he was like 17.
Yeah.
I think he spent 8 hours total over 2 days in these hearings, and it was weird for him facing him in this courtroom because he said that he would keep making eye contact with him and then wink at him, just like really creepy shit.
He would like have a stare down.
Yeah.
He said he would just stare and then wink, trying to intimidate him.
Ugh.
Ramirez actually had his trial postponed for years. This is why he was 17 at this point, but why James had to wait years to testify against him, because California didn't know which jurisdiction it fell under. That's how many cities he committed these crimes in. They didn't know where to charge him and how, and
they actually ended up, some of his charges fell off to try to speed up the process because it was taking so long. During this time, Ramirez from prison developed this weird like cult-like following of fans, people that would write to him, people that would come try to visit him, and I guess kind of rally for him.
What is wrong with people?
Why do people do that with serial killers? It's so creepy. And then also, while incarcerated, he started a relationship with a 41-year-old Doreen Leoy, I think is how you say her name. They ended up getting married.
They dated for a few years and then they got married. She was a self-proclaimed virgin.
Self-proclaimed?
That's what it says.
Finally, they find him guilty of 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 sexual assault charges, and 14 burglary charges. And after the verdict was read in court, he said, "I am beyond good and evil. I will be avenged. Lucifer dwells in us all." That's it. And then another quote, something that he said was, "Hey, big deal. Death always comes with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland." Bitch, you better not.
You're not allowed in Disneyland. I forbid it.
So this entire time that he was alive, he didn't feel any kind of sorrow or guilt towards anything that he did.
As soon as he got incarcerated, he started developing plans to escape. And there were two. One was a plan he actually, he just had the plan, but he didn't act on it. The other one, he went through a metal detector with the guards, which I think was a new metal detector or a route he'd never taken before, but they found a handcuff key in his rectum. And he was going to get loose and then continue his crime spree. The second one, the one that he didn't do anything with, was actually because of a fan was riding him and they were planning an escape.
How do you think he got it up his butt?
Practice.
Yeah, but how did he just get it from the guard?
I don't know, maybe he stole it. Maybe he paid somebody. During the trial, one of the jury members was murdered. And a lot of, like, the jury members that were remaining were terrified because they didn't know if it was at his hands, if he had set it up, but it was actually a domestic dispute, and the girl's boyfriend shot her and killed her. But
weird coincidence.
They were scared to come into the trial. They were scared to go home.
So on November 7th, 1989, he was sentenced to death by gas chamber. But until they were able to do that, he was sent to the San Quentin prison in California just so he could spend the remaining time there until he was led to the gas chamber. So this entire trial cost $1.8 million. Which is absolutely crazy. It was, at that time, the most expensive case in the history of California. That's so much money. The crazy thing to me is how long it takes people to actually be put to death. Like, he spent almost 24 years on death row, never made it to the gas chamber because he died at the age of 53, related to B-cell lymphoma. It's a kind of blood cancer that affects your lymph nodes. And he also was affected by all the substance abuse, all the drugs that he did over his life.
Hepatitis C.
Mm-hmm.
They said that when he died, he turned bright green, which is liver failure. They said it was like a highlighter green.
I've never seen anything like that or heard about anything like that.
I've peed neon green from taking vitamins. So remember how we told you that LAPD didn't really want to acknowledge he was in San Francisco at first? Well, in 2009, based on DNA, they found that 9-year-old Mei Leung, I think that's how you say it. If I mispronounce it, I'm so sorry. She was murdered in a hotel basement in San Francisco. And in 2009, finally, Richard Ramirez was linked to that crime and his DNA matched to it. So
that's like How many years later?
2009.
It's like 30 years later.
I just went to hair school.
I don't know.
Finally,
too long.
I was trying to sit there and think about this because we're reading it all together in a story. But imagine being a cop. Ring, ring. Okay, there's a murder on First Street in Los Angeles. They were shot in the head. And then there was how do you determine it's all the same person? That has to take so much.
Yeah.
So much time and energy. Paul Holes, bless you. I can't imagine. That would keep me up at night. If I was an investigator, it would keep me up at night trying to, well, this one might be connected here because they're both gunshot wounds, and then oh no, they're not related at all. Like, oh my God, for them to put all this together, like, I do think detectives put in a lot more work than they get credit for. That's
absolutely.
Sure.
I can't believe that I studied psychology and thought I wanted to be a crime scene investigator. There's no way I could do that. There's no way.
It took one sentence from my mother when I told her I wanted to be a criminal psychologist. She said, Kaycie, what if they get out of jail and find you?
That's what
kill your whole family. And I was like, nope.
But that also makes me wonder about what other crimes he committed that nobody linked him to. Like, what if there are like 20 other murders that he just wasn't linked to?
Exactly. Before he died, him and Doreen, they were separated. Nobody knows why. They said that there were theories that once it was leaked that Mei Lung was also one of his victims, she was like not down with that. I guess 9-year-olds are her deal breaker. But another one was that he didn't show any remorse for his crimes.
What did she think she was getting herself into?
Ew, she kissed him willingly.
Oh my God, the worst part, the most unbelievable thing about AHS 1984 is that Montana makes out with him. All I could think about was his breath.
We're gonna sidestep into American Horror Story Richard Ramirez and real Richard Ramirez. I think they did a fantastic job casting him. Like,
he looks just like him.
He looked just like him.
And they also did go into his backstory a little bit.
They did a little bit, yeah. But a lot, like, some of it is a little bit extra, which I guess it's American Horror Story. But I think they did a good job. His storyline in that show doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't.
It's really random.
At this point, we're only up to episode 4, so by the time we upload this, maybe we'll figure something else out. But I'm like, what is happening? Why are you bringing a real-life serial killer into this show and giving him his own backstory that has nothing to do with what actually happened
Exactly.
in his life?
So,
unless it's a movie that they're filming.
That's our theory. We're coining it right now. We're on episode 4. I think episode 5 airs tonight. We think the whole series is a movie.
Which I'll be disappointed about because that's what Roanoke was pretty much.
Well, the thing is, Emma Roberts' character is not an Emma Roberts character. She's too nice, so she's gonna go psycho here pretty soon.
Oh yeah, she's hiding something. I don't know what it is, but she is. Maybe she's Doreen. No, she'd be like
maybe she's Madison Montgomery.
That's what I'm thinking.
Acting. Yeah. Before we end, I do want to read something. Tell us below. I'm gonna read this and then tell us your opinion. This was an interview with a Dr. Scott Bond, criminologist and author of Why We Love Serial Killers, The Curious Appeal of the World's Most Savage Murderers. That's too long of a name for a book. About what he thinks were the powerful catalysts for the makings of a serial killer. He said, "There's always a question of whether serial killers are made or born. I believe Richard Ramirez was a sociopath as opposed to a psychopath. A psychopath is absolutely incapable of feeling any normal range of emotions, and that was the case with Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. Ramirez, on the other hand, was prone to emotional outbursts, spontaneous and volatile. A sociopath is developed through life experiences and manufactured in society. Also, unlike Bundy or Gacy, who planned their murders meticulously, Ramirez randomly picked homes to break into. A psychopath wouldn't do that. A psychopath needs control. So yes, all these factors I believe contribute. But what seems to happen with some serial killers, and it happened with Jeffrey Dahmer, the BTK Strangler, and Bundy, is that right around puberty, sex and violence fuse in their minds, and they become aroused by violence. When his cousins showed him those photographs, Ramirez became sexually aroused, and it was right around the age 13. So, what do you guys think? Are serial killers born, or are they made? I think in this case, he was made.
I think so, too. I think that he had a lot of influences in his most important influential years of his life that made him kind of develop into the way that he was.
Yep.
But I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I have no idea. And I feel like it can be either way depending on the person and the circumstances too. Like, I think that they can be born and they can be made, but it just depends.
Yeah, because sometimes I'll hear something and I'm like, why do you think like that? Like, how does somebody's brain automatically go to that? But he was trained to think like this.
And some people that do these things aren't trained or like
they can't
raised
help it
to do that. Nothing bad happens to them, and
those ones I think are clinically insane.
Yeah.
That was the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. We want to do more videos like this, so if you guys know of a certain story you want to hear about, we have, of course, our favorites.
Yes.
We'll put that in quotes because, like, is it really a favorite?
Sounds weird to say favorites, but you know what we mean.
So we have a few we want to do. If you like these types of videos, if you want to see us do something else other than eat while we talk about it, please let us know.
If you were in this area, in the LA, San Francisco area in the 80s, and you remember this hype of the Night Stalker, please leave us a comment. That'd be so interesting to read.
Leave comments so everybody can see it. Tell us your entire, like, if you have any information, we want to know about it.
And just how it felt to, like, live in that time and place.
Yes. Share this video so other people can see it. I know there's a lot of people that want to know about him because of 1984 American Horror Story. Like the video, subscribe, share, all that fun jazz. We'll see you probably next week. I am going to have braces, so I'm...
Oh my God, it's happening!
I get them tomorrow.
I'm so excited to see what they look like.
I'm gonna look like that girl from Finding Nemo.
Okay, guys, thanks for watching. Let us know what you want to see next.
Yes.
And we will see you in the next one.
Alrighty, bye.